This is Reverend Marvin Horan of 3522 Point Lick Drive, Charleston, West Virginia. A spokesman for the concerned citizens of Charleston, West Virginia, one of the protest leaders in the anti-textbook controversy that's taken place in September 1974. September 1974, a year that brought a great deal of turmoil, heartache, agony, and a lot of confusion to Charleston, West Virginia, Kanawha County. Thousands of protesters marched in the streets. Thousands of protesters met at the Board of Education on Elizabeth Street in Charleston, West Virginia on June 27. At this point, these parents were praying and were pleading with the board members not to adopt these particular books for our schools. The parents were very upset, but the board members were determined to put this corruption into the classrooms. The books have been proven to be anti-American, anti-God. Anything that's good, that's pure, that's wholesome, these books are contrary to it. After much prayer that God would lead us and guide us with His Holy Spirit, that God would give us the wisdom to combat this onslaught of sin, we entered into the Kanawha County textbook controversy. I got involved when we had a meeting at the Camels Creek Community Park. The meeting was to take place at 6 o'clock. At 6:30, I got on the platform to bring the meeting to order in prayer. After we had the prayer, I stated my sentiments as far as the books was concerned, and from that point, I was involved in the controversy, and still am involved, and probably will be involved until we finally win this great battle. But people all across America must wake up to the fact that God's laws must be our laws, that God's ways must be our ways, that God's thinking must be our thinking, that God's thoughts must be our thoughts, that God's life must be our life. And without these things, then God will surely destroy us. It appears today that the American people in our great country has lost all insight of patriotism, abiding by the law. We've lost all sight of Jesus Christ in Calvary, and we're living in a dark, troublesome day. It's time that people everywhere wake up and see what they don't have, and ask God to give us all the wisdom to obtain what we need. We need the Bible back into the classrooms. We need prayer back into the classrooms. We need discipline back into the classrooms. We need respect back into our classrooms. We need to come together again in unity. The textbooks brought on a great deal of pain and agony for a lot of people in our valley. It wasn't but 2 or 3 months after the protest had started that some of our ministers, Ezra Grayley, Avis Hill, was put in jail, falsely accused, condemned, and jailed. It wasn't long after their release until I was picked up by the federal marshals and was accused of wrongdoing and conspiring to blow up schools. I was charged with 4 charges. At the end of my trial, I was only found guilty on conspiracy. The conspiracy charge brought me 3 years sentence in jail and no fine. However, we've appealed this decision to the 4th Circuit Court in Richmond, Virginia. There have been 12 to 14 discrepancies in my case, and hopefully we'll have a strong enough case there that we can have a retrial. If we lose in Richmond, Virginia, then it's our desires to carry our case on to the Supreme Court in Washington. Any time that God gives a person or persons the ability to lead a group of people in a positive direction, then that person or persons must expect to suffer. And if we suffer with Christ, we shall also reign with him. My involvement in the textbook controversy started in September 1974 when we had the meeting at the Camels Creek Community Park. From that park, we called another meeting. At this meeting, we had about 10,000 people that had gathered for this meeting. After this meeting, we had laid out our plans for the boycott of schools. The church buses would run. It would carry the people to the protest lines and back home again. This would be repeated daily until we could get something done at the Board of Education. At this time, we called another meeting, which about 3,000 people had participated in this next rally. Again, we regrouped. We took on new courage, new hope, new faith, new recruits, and we continued the boycott of our schools. From this point, we entered into a new era. The coal miners had decided to join the fight to help us to get the books out of the schools. So the coal miners began to march. Coal mines were shut down, trucking companies were shut down, plants were shut down, utilities were shut down, different places, construction companies were shut down. Work throughout all the valley was just about come to a halt. The transit companies, the Greyhound bus companies, everything was brought to a halt. The boycott truly was on, and it was truly effective at this point. The Kanawha Valley, the system, was beginning to feel the pressure from the people. At this point, the board members got together and drawed up a proposal. And they said they would take out certain books that was so controversial. They would take them out and they would be debated. And these books would be removed from the classrooms. Our children would not be exposed to this filth and corruption as we define it. And that our children could go back to school with the parents being assured that their children would not be exposed to this until something could be done. At this point, we began to call the protesters off of the lines, the men to go back to work, the children to go back to school. Hopefully that we could get an honorable solution from the Board of Education, that we could continue in our county and in our schools with the same freedom and with the same good, wholesome atmosphere that we've all been used to. For the first time in the history of our county, some 30-some thousand people has rallied up and has demanded a better education for their children. Yet, there's about 500 or 600 people that opposes us, and so forth. They have seemed to be unable to rule with an iron hand. But we must remember the words of the Lord. If God is for us, then who can be against us? But while the coal miners was on the picket lines, the law began to move in. Protesters was harassed. Various things happened on the in our county that the protesters was not accountable for. However, the news media laid it on to the protesters. This has been 9 months of agony for all people concerned. During the heat of the controversy, I went to Judge Knapp's office, a federal judge, and this was the first time that I had met this honorable man. And I talked to him concerning my involvement in the protest. And I asked him, Mr. Knapp, to help me find an honorable way for me to step down as spokesman or leader for the protesters. At this point, I told Mr. Knapp, I said that the protest has got out of proportion. It's greater than both of us. I don't feel that I'm the man that's capable of giving these people the leadership that they need to advance forward in a peaceful way, to hold it together so we can advance in a peaceful way. I feel that I've done the best that I could do, and I need an honorable way to step down. However, I'll continue my efforts for better education. If I don't like what's going on in the school system, I'll put my children in a private school, and I can continue to protest from this point. But Mr. Knapp advised me to stay on the platform. He said, Reverend, you're the only person that's able to keep these people together. They'll listen to you. They'll follow you. They'll follow your instructions. If you step down and turn this over to the hands of a radical, and this person would issue an order for this valley to go to war, and there'd be a lot of innocent people killed, Mr. Knapp says, how could you live with this on your conscience, knowing had you stayed on the platform it would have never happened? So at his encouragement, a federal judge, I decided that I would stay on the platform. I would continue as the spokesman for the concerned citizens of Kanawha County. This was in October. In November, the middle part of November, the federal marshals began to move in Camel's Creek, where the stronghold of the protest was. At this point, they began to question our neighbors. They would threaten the neighbors. After they would leave, the neighbors would call me and tell them what they said and what they'd done. The neighbors would say that they want us to sign a statement against you, Reverend. True or false, they don't care as long as we sign a statement against you. They want you. Everybody else can go as long as they get you. You're the man that they want. So these reports kept coming in, and at this time I went back to Mr. Knapp's office, and I told Mr. Knapp, I said, there's a scandal coming. I've lost my job. 11, 12 years with the company that I worked for. I've lost my job, my insurance, my position. I've lost everything as far as the company's concerned. The only two things I have left is my two prized possessions, my ministry and my family, and I don't want to put these two in jeopardy by getting caught up in a scandal that I know that's sure to come. And so again, Mr. Knapp encourages me to stay on the platform. I'm the only man that can keep peace at this point in the valley as far as he's concerned. So again, with this advice, I said that I would stay on the platform and I would do the best possible job to keep anybody from being hurt or anything from being destroyed. On January 21st, I was getting ready to go to a church meeting when the phone rang and my attorney called and said that the grand jury had issued an indictment and I had to show up at the federal building because I was under arrest. So instead of going to the church gathering, I went to the federal building, and at this point I was placed on a $50,000 bond, and I was not to participate anymore in any textbook controversy, any marches, any rallies, and etc. So they have not only tried to put us in jail and confine us they've also tried to take away our freedom of speech and have done it. Let us go back to the beginning of the controversy for just a moment. The people of West Virginia hired an attorney. His name was Tom Cicarilla. We asked Mr. Cicarilla to take our grievance to the courtroom before an unbiased jury, to argue our case before an unbiased jury. Let the Board of Education send their lawyers to argue their point. If we lost the case, then we would abide, if we lost the case, then we would abide by the jury's decision. But if we won the case, then the books would have to be taken out of the schools. We let the courts know that we did not want to march, we didn't want to boycott the schools, we didn't want to shut them down, we did not want to have turmoil in our county, in our communities, in our churches, in our homes, and etc., that we wanted a peaceful solution. The government is set up for the people, by the people, but in this particular case, they never gave us any representation whatsoever. When our attorney, Tom Cicarilla, approached the courtroom and he approached the judge's bench, he was flatly denied his day in court. They would not consider our grievance. They would not allow us to have a day in court with these books to prove that they're anti-American, anti-religion. We was denied any rights whatsoever in the courtroom. Now it seems that the courtroom has opened up in order to receive the ministers, so the ministers can receive 3, 4, 5, 10 years in a penitentiary somewhere for something that they never even done. However, there's thousands of people all across our nation that is behind the movement, and I suppose they feel they must quash this movement that we have started. But it's going to take a lot of dedication. It's going to take sacrifice in order for us to have any victories at all concerning this filth that is surely to destroy our country, that is surely to destroy our young people. It's not this type of education that makes good judges, that makes good presidents, that makes good legislators, that makes good senators, that makes good governors, that makes good mayors. It certainly isn't this type of education, but it is this type of education that will destroy our whole country and everything and all the ideals and all the principles and all the things that we have held dear to us all of our life. This type of education surely will destroy everything that we've loved and held dear to us throughout the past 200 years. We must stand up for our heritage. We must stand up for God and for country. We must be a strong, dedicated witness for the power and the glory of God if our country is to be saved. We must lift up our voices in prayer. After we have these prayers, we must take action in some direction in order to begin to have some major victories throughout our country concerning the educational system. One of the great things that I have noticed out of our people throughout every state that I've been in different counties that I've been in my own state, is that most of our people are dedicated to the law, and they live by the law, no matter how corrupted that law might be, no matter how rotten that law might be, no matter how many that might be hurt or destroyed in the long run over a particular law. But the American people just simply lives by the law, whether it's good or whether it's bad. They try to obey the law. Now, one of the things that we must do in the coming elections in 1976, we must have a democratic revolution. We must take people from our own ranks and run them for office. We must see to it that these people win these offices. If we want a better educational system, that means we're going to have better legislators, because they're the ones that pass the law for us to live by. We're going to have better senators. We're going to have better board members. People need to wake up all across America in every state and begin to vote into these offices people out of your own ranks. Be sure to get ready for 1976, and let's make it a great year, not only for the people, but for the glory of God. God has blessed us with a country that flows with milk and honey. God has blessed us with all the necessities and convenience of life. The land has yielded her strength yearly, and we're certainly blessed with a wonderful country and a wonderful land. But we must remember that God, from God's hand, we have accomplished and we have the things we have. In Jesus Christ, we have our beings and we move about. We must depend upon the leadership of God. We must get good, godly people into these offices. Then these laws can be changed, and we can have some godly laws. We can come back to the laws of God. God's laws can be put back into our system. Our system can be cleaned up. There is hope for our country if the people will unite for one common cause, and that is to clean up our country, the filth that we're in now. We can only be grateful that God has woken us up to the fact that what is going on will surely destroy us unless there's a change. Now, I personally intend to run for Senate position in Charleston, West Virginia, in Kanawha County, against William Brotherton, a 24-year incumbent. This man has made a lot of sarcastic remarks about these thousands of protesters. For some reason, he is forgetting the fact that it's these thousands of people They put him in office every 2 years. I will be a candidate, be the Lord's will, against William Brotherton in the 1976 election. I realize at this point that I'm making this tape that my freedom is in jeopardy. I'm sitting here taping this with a 3 years jail sentence hanging over me. But greater is he that's in you than he that's in the world. If God calls us and ordains us, then God will protect us and he'll use us for his glory. So I would rather suffer for the glory of God, for a good cause, as to suffer with this corruption that's going on in our country. We must take a firm stand against this, or certainly this corruption is going to destroy us. So I have intentions of running against William Brotherton for a Senate position in the 1976 election. I also understand that Ezra Grayley has a political position that he'll be running for. I'm sure that Mr. Avis Hill will be running for a political position. We have some mayors in different towns of our county that's fine, dedicated men to God and the country that has a desire to see things straightened up, to see our society come back to its senses and come back to the way a society should be. I feel that probably some of these mayors will be candidates on the ballots in the 1976 election. I think in 1976 it's going to be one of the greatest, interesting years that we have ever had for an election year. I believe people are really enthused. People are really going to come out. Probably there'll be more people voting in 76 than there ever have been, due to the fact that we need a change. And we can have this change if we'll bind together. Now, what's going to happen in Kanawha County in the future? Well, we hope that as soon as the election is over, and I feel confident that I'll win, then we'll launch a federal investigation into the board members. We will demand their resignation from office. We will see to it that we have a recall bill passed by the legislators and the Senate, and this recall bill will allow us to recall these board members, and in return we'll vote them out. So we have plans of straightening up our county. We must let everyone know that we will not give up, that this battle must be won if we're to survive on this earth. We must win. We must do it in a peaceful demonstration. We must do it in God's grace. We must win, and when we do win, make sure that the opposition can see that it was the glory and the grace and the power of God that give us the victory. We can win, friends, if we'll stay with God. So we have every intention to continue our efforts in the valley, in Kanawha Valley, and to carry on our efforts against this corrupted education that's surely to destroy our children unless we have a major victory. During the height of the protest, in the heat of it, about 8 or 10 mayors in what we call the Upper Kanawha Valley would meet quite frequently concerning the protest. This is in the mining fields. And we would meet quite often. We would discuss peaceful means and peaceful ways that we could go about to bring an honorable solution to this problem that we have. But I believe with all of my heart we're living in a time when people that are in the government position now don't care anything at all about the people. They only care about power, wealth. They don't care anything at all about the people. And I believe any time that a person thinks more of his own self and his own personal gain than he does of the people that he represents, then he's no longer any use to the people. For this reason, we need a change. However, these mayors worked very close with me in this textbook protest. They were very, very strong, dedicated, united group of mayors. They fought real hard. They worked hard. They prayed hard. They marched with us. They was at our rallies. They supported us in everything that we did. People sees high, prominent, position men sees what must be done if we're to save our society. There's only a small segment of people that want this filth in our classrooms, and these people has been able to bring about on election days, they've been able to get their people in office that will give them the laws so they can put this kind of material in our schools. For this reason, we must, in 1976, change these political offices, and once we change the law and the law is enforced, then that means we can clean up our schools. There is hope if we'll go about it in the right way. And then the Businessmen's Alliance for Better Textbooks began to develop, and businessmen from various areas of Charleston, Mr. Almer Fike, an owner of a chemical company, Mr. Donald Means, owner of a construction company, and different various businessmen in the Charleston area began to form a group, and they called us in on some of their meetings and told us their desires and that they wished to help us in any way that they could. And so these men began to openly support us and give us a lot of support, moral support, in the business district of Charleston, West Virginia, which had a great impact on our movement. There was a lot of chain markets that had signs hanging out that we are against this store is against the textbooks and so on and so forth. And we really had a big, magnificent protest going the first 3 or 4 months of 1974. Now, when we came to the cooling off period, this 30-day cooling off period, the board members promised us that they would set up guidelines, that they would never again in the future be any books put into the schools that's anti-religion, anti-American, unpatriotic books. They just wouldn't be anything like this that would offend the parents put back in the classrooms. So they drawed up these guidelines, and it was stated in there, there'll be no books go into the classrooms with any pornography, obscenity, anything blasphemous, or anything that would teach racial hatred, or anything that would teach a child to steal, to cheat, to lie, or to rebel against his parents, to rebel against duly authorized authority. So these guidelines were set up for the future from that date on. It was in November, and we thought, boy, we really had a major victory here. However, the board members selected some social study books to go into our classrooms in September 1975, which is only 3 months away, and they made the statement that these textbooks, that the social studies that's going in September 1975, if we thought the textbooks was bad, we should see the new social study books. So after they had passed the guidelines stating that no more books would go in that would offend the parents, then they adopted these social studies and other books to go in September 1975 that's worse than the books that we were fighting in 1974. So the board members in Kanawha County have no intentions whatsoever of backing up. So at this point, we put more pressure on the board members through a protest, and this brought about the resignation of Dr. Kenneth Underwood, which was never no benefit to our school system to start with. And now I understand he's in Chicago, getting ready to join a county in Chicago, someplace in Chicago. At any rate, he's gone, and I guess he's on Chicago's hands now. At any rate, Mr. Anson, another board member, he resigned from office. Now we have a new superintendent of schools. His name is Mr. Sandtrock, and he says if the pressure isn't eased off, that he too is going to resign. Well, if the people can't take what's going on, they should resign. We want somebody in there that will give us a change. It wasn't long after this until the NEA, the National Education Association, stepped into the picture. They set up a meeting at the Civic Center in Charleston, West Virginia, and they was here for 3 days. They was here on a Monday, a Tuesday, and Wednesday, the 12th, 13th, and 14th, I believe it was. And various people went down on those 3 days, and we talked about the textbooks, we talked about our problems and what it was going to take to solve our problems. And at first, they appeared to be concerned about our grievance and our complaints and what was going on. But now that they have gone, and then they sent back a report to Charleston what they thought, what their sentiments was concerning the protest, and they call us illiterate, ignorant people, and we don't know what's going on, and so everything's all right in Charleston, West Virginia as far as they're concerned. Now, as far as the NEA is concerned, they never brought anything to Charleston. They didn't take anything out, and we'd do just as well without them ever coming back to Charleston, West Virginia. Then after this, it brought on the NAACP, and the NAACP threatened the board members along with Elmer Fike, Avis Hill, and myself, Reverend Horan. And they said if the books were not put back into the schools within 60 days, this was in April. First part of April said if the books wasn't put back in the schools in 60 days, that it would be a long, hot summer for Reverend Horan, for Hill, for Avis Hill, Reverend Avis Hill, for Reverend Greeley, and for Elmer Fike and other people that's deeply involved in the textbook protest. Now, at this threat, we believe that these members of the NAACP should have been picked up for threatening the lives of the ministers. However, they was encouraged to go on and commit the acts that they had threatened us with. I don't believe that the NAACP has anything to offer Kanawha County. I don't believe they want anything to do with Kanawha County, and I'm sure they fully realize what could happen if they come in and try to make a racial issue out of it. Now, let me state that this is not a racial issue. It never has been a racial issue, and it never will be a racial issue. This is a textbook issue, and it will remain a textbook issue.